The meeting of the Committee of Infrastructure will be held Wednesday, September 30th, 2020 at 7 p.m. via teleconference. As chairman of the Committee of Infrastructure, I find, due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda of the city's website of the meeting link. To join by phone, dial 1-929-205-6099 with a meeting ID of 857-3636-6413 with passcode 458-364. This public may also view the meeting via channel 16. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for assessing the meeting for the public postings. Instructions are also provided on the city national website at www.nationalnehampshire.gov and publicly noticed at City Hall and National Public Library. If anybody has a
Who is the vice chair of this committee?
It may actually be me.
I think it's you, Mr. Lopez,
All right,
Alderman
give me a sec. I
Lopez.
gotta find my script.
Do you want me to finish that part?
Yeah, if you have it.
If anyone has a problem assessing the meeting via phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they'll help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that we are taking during the meeting will be done by roll call votes. Let's start the meeting by taking off a roll call attendance. Then each member states they're present. Please let me know if you are in the room alone under the right to know law that is required. So I will take attendance. We know that Alderman Michael J. O'Brien is available, not online right this moment. Alderman Thomas Lopez.
I am here.
Alderman Jan Schmidt is here. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
I'm here. I can hear you, and I'm staying safer at home alone.
Thank you. And Alderman David Tenza. I believe he's not available today. We have 4, perhaps 3 members in attendance. Over to you, Mr. Alderman Lopez.
All right, so I think our only agenda item is actually a presentation by Director Cummings.
Is there anyone who would like to give us public comment?
Oh, sorry, I thought that was at the end of the meeting.
Do we know if there's anyone on? I don't have a screen for that.
I see Manny Ramirez on here, but I think he's just interested in what's going on with the downtown barriers.
Okay. Well, that would be the presentation. We can go straight over to Tim Cummings, Economic Development.
Thank you, Alderwoman Schmidt. Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development for the city, and it says presentation on the agenda. Really, what I'm trying to do is have an informal conversation about the barriers with you all to hopefully get some guidance and get a better understanding as to the direction that you all would like to go if we were to continue with narrowing of Main Street for next season. So the narrowing of Main Street has been very successful. We have had a very good response, both from the downtown merchants themselves, and then the users of the outdoor dining in the more of the pedestrian realm that we've created by narrowing the main street. So we're in just a listening mode right now. We're just trying to gather feedback, get a sense as to what the pleasure may be of the community. We've started this conversation as well with the Downtown Improvement Committee, and I'll be looking to have a community type forum that I had previously to kind of get a sense from various stakeholders as to what their pleasure might be. But with that being said, we recently undertook an effort to pilot some different barriers. Should we so desire next year to continue with the narrowing of Main Street. These barriers are of two different types of structures. One is currently out there on East Pearl Street right now, which you may have seen. And then another barrier actually is slated to be erected and put up sometime in the next week or so. And that is a different type of barrier. And we specifically chose two very distinct type of structures. One, to get the sense from the community as to what their interest may be, but then to talk about the different pros and cons to the two structures. Again, that's if we're going to continue with this. And with that being said, I'd like to kind of open it up to the group and have just an informal dialogue as to what your thoughts are. So hopefully I can craft a piece of legislation if that's so the desire of this group. I can tell you some thoughts and recommendations that I have as well. So before I do that, I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. I want to show you.
Before you do that, Director Cummings, I just want to point out that Alderman O'Brien has returned, so I'm handing the virtual gavel to him.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez, and good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to just quickly pull up my screen here and show you the two different barriers that we're working with. One is a photo of the barrier. Bear with me here. So I'm going to pull up this barrier right here. Hopefully everyone can see that. This is the barrier that has yet to be put out onto Main Street. That is going to be put out sometime over the next week or so. My understanding is it will be put up. Along Main Street from roughly San Francisco Kitchen just to before Espresso's Pizza. And we own these barriers. These are concrete barriers that we would be installing and we would be maintaining. These barriers are being stored right now. They're being delivered on the School Street parking lot in the downtown, and then we will be assembling them over the next week or so. And the barriers that are currently there, we're actually going to move out onto, I believe, Factory Street and look to narrow Factory Street a little bit to just, pilot the idea of narrowing that street, because there's a lot of potential changes coming about with potentially some enhancements in that neighborhood. So with that being said, I just wanted to give you a quick visualization of what this barrier looks like. This barrier meets all public safety standards. I believe this is the barrier that can be operationally put in place much more efficiently, and is a barrier that, if we were to, look to decorate it, that's something that we could do, I think, more easily than the other barrier. The putting in of this equipment, this barrier may be a little difficult. Still trying to understand and assess that. Originally, we were thinking we might be able to drop these barriers and pick these barriers up. We may need to subcontract that. So that's still, something we're working on to kind of understand. But nonetheless, this is essentially the structure we would be looking to potentially procure next year for next year's use, if that's the pleasure of the group. I'm seeing Alderman Lopez just raised his hand, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if you want me to take questions now. I'm happy to take questions as we go.
It's
Yeah,
specific
thank you,
to that
Director
barrier. That's
Cummings.
why.
Hold on for a second, Tom, and to other committee members. As with the presentation, I have no objection at the proper moment. If you want to be recognized to speak, please do so while the graphics are up. I think that will keep everything going smoothly. So thank you. I recognize Alderman Lopez. Thank you.
Yeah, Director Cummings, I just didn't want to make you fish through this if I had a question later, but those are, it looks like those two little cutouts along the bottom are for a forklift. What's the difficulty in putting those in on our own?
That's correct. A forklift. And the answer is, as I understand it, the weight of these particular barriers, making sure we have the right piece of equipment that actually can hold the weight.
We need a super forklift. Okay.
Yeah, something. I think that I am no expert, but I think that would be a better description. Yes, you need a very, very strong piece of equipment to be able to move these barriers. And I am not sure we actually have that type of equipment on hand right now. So that's something that we're still, again, assessing and trying to understand as we develop a potential plan to move forward.
Okay, just trying to make sure I understood the picture right there.
Yep, but you're absolutely correct. That's for that's to easily move them and drop them in and out of place. Again, so that's the hope here is to have a roundtable type conversation, a dialogue to get people's thoughts, and we'll continue with the conversation. So if there's no other
Director Cummings, if I may,
please.
you might hear from somebody in the public that has some construction experience, but I know the city does have a front end loader. There is an attachment you can put on the front end loader to have fork tines. So maybe that's something you may inquire with Public Works, and might be worth the purchase if we do not have such equipment.
Exactly. And that's sort of what I'm flagging for you now. And yes, if we have the equipment internally, we'll use that, but I wanted to potentially just raise this as again, as we're assessing all the different options, I want you just to be aware of the various issues at hand.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I ask a question?
Who is this?
Alderman Clemmons?
Oh, yes. Alderman Clemmons, thank you.
Thank you. My question is, how many of these did we purchase for the trial?
Yes. Amy DeRoche is on the line, and she'll probably correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe it's just under 200 or about 200 linear feet.
20 barriers.
I'm sorry, 20 barriers, 10 feet each.
Okay. And what are the cost of these?
Amy, do you have that at your fingertips?
Everything included with the shipping and everything, it was around 35,000, I want to say.
For 200 feet?
Or you should do it by barrier or by 20 barriers.
Or by 20, okay.
Yeah, and that will give
long.
Say again?
They're 10 feet long?
10
Yes.
feet long, correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay. But just so I understand a visual about how many, like how long is that? Like what would that cover on Main Street?
It would be 2 feet longer than a regular standard car. So if you think of like a Toyota Camry, if you were looking at a Toyota Camry front on, so the windshield's in front of you, it would be 1 foot on either side of that. That's
Okay, all right.
a rough estimation of what gives you the size of a barrier.
Was any of my last question on these, was any of the $200,000 that we allocated used for that, or was that other money, the 35,000 spent from other money?
Correct, yeah, so the $200,000 that was just recently put aside through the escrows has not been touched. And that would be the money available if we were to endeavor to do something. And so we're gonna have to work within that budget. And so, with that being said, it's really going to come down developing a plan where we can maximize our dollars and be as efficient as possible. One of the things we could do to stretch that out is maybe not put the barriers like we did this time around, touching, but put a couple of feet of space in between each barrier. That would help us get some more coverage. But ultimately, we're going to have to make some decisions as to where we want to actually place these barriers, because we're not going to be able to do the entire stretch of, I think we did something on the order of magnitude of 2,400 square feet of coverage, maybe just a little less than that, but that in that range. And we're probably gonna, be shy of that, not be able to cover as much.
Okay, and I mean, yeah, and I understand that not all of them are being used anyhow. So I think we can be more strategic in where we do it, and really find from the business owners that really want it and want to do it. We can prioritize those folks. And the other thing is too is if it is popular and people do want to do it, we can find the money somewhere else too, in my opinion. But no, in my opinion, these look nice. I agree with what the chairman said, in that trying to find a way that we can do the moving of these ourselves in house, particularly if we're going to buy it sounds like we already have a substantial number of them. So if we, doing it in house would obviously be preferable, but I guess it just depends on how cheap you could outsource it.
That's right. Yep, exactly. And your payback. I mean, part of the thought process is, and again, I'm here tonight not to make any recommendations at this point in time, but if you look at buying a piece of equipment, if you're going to be doing this on a multi-year basis, what's your payback over 5 years, and doing that type of analysis.
Mhm.
It may be worthwhile just to buy the piece of equipment. It's definitely something to think about as you're looking at pros and cons to the various barriers. So what I was thinking of doing now is just switching gears, showing the other barrier and having a similar type conversation. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment here, and I'm going to see if I can pull up the other barrier, which hopefully everyone can see now. So these barriers have been put out onto East Pearl Street. You can see they're very different than the other barrier. They were designed with aesthetics in mind, and they were designed to be a structure that met public safety standards universally, but nonetheless was done in a way that would be attractive for the downtown. These structures, we put up about 150, I believe, linear feet. Amy will correct me.
130, but yes.
130 at a price of 20,000. So it gives you an idea of what that cost would be on a again, I believe these are 10 each as well. Go ahead, Amy.
Yes, they are. They're the same dimensions as a Jersey barrier, but they're just designed to be put out by a person.
Exactly. So, and Amy just touched upon one of the bigger differences is operationally, these are much easier to put out, in the sense that you can lift them, move them, place them when there's no water inside them. So what's inside this is a water tank, and you fill it with water, and that what makes it immobile. And that takes time. So something you should be aware of is is if these were to go out, you could set them up very easily. But what you would have to do is spend the time of actually filling them with water with a hose. It's not difficult to do. In fact, you can see some of the water that was left over from when these were when these were filled, as this photo was taken when they were just displayed. But nonetheless, it is something that we're going to have to be aware of from a logistics and operations perspective as part of the plan. Could you draw or have any type of art on these? I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't. I would think this material is just sheet metal, so you just have to be cognizant of that's the type of material that you're working with. And again, we would own these barriers as opposed to renting them. So it is definitely something we could do in terms of taking ownership. Relative to durability, between the Jersey barrier and this, I would say the durability is a little bit less on this one. It definitely, if a car hit it, it would, from a public safety standard, it would meet the test, but you'd have scuff marks and it would be much more noticeable as opposed to a Jersey barrier, which if that took a hit, that's kind of the nature of the beast of why you have those type of structures, and it kind of just wouldn't stand out as much. As you can see, it was personalized. It was done by a local nonprofit based out of Massachusetts that works on beautifying downtowns. That's what they do. So that Nashua imprint right there, that lights up, and you can, if you can see my arrow on the screen here, this is what I'm talking about. It lights up here. If you can see my arrow on the screen, you can add an additional feature right here, up and over, and attach it onto the other side of the barriers, depending on where you'd like it. And you can string lights on top of these as well. That's a built-in feature as an amenity that folks could do if there was a desire. Of course, you'd have to run electricity to it. That brings in a whole other level of complication, but nonetheless, I wanted to make sure folks were aware of the fact that there's an attachment right here that goes up about 4-5 feet, and you can get a string of lights and attach it down to the other side, and it looks like a traditional type of hanging light that you'd see off of a barrier. So happy to answer any questions on this structure.
The chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cummings, I did some quick math, and it sounds like on a square footage basis, these silver ones here are less expensive per foot than the other ones. By almost $25. Do we own these? Did we purchase these ones as well?
Correct. Yep, we own these ones as well.
I mean, it seems to me, in my opinion, whereas these are less expensive, they're easier to put out. We don't need machinery to do it. It would seem to me that these would be the ones we would want to go with. Just in my own personal opinion, they're less. We're going to get more for our dollar, footage wise, and all we have to do is fill them with water. I mean, I don't think that's. I think that's an advantage, actually. Just throwing out my opinion.
I thank you, Alderman Clemens. I think it's, I would say to the group, I would recommend that everyone just listen before you really make any decisions or recommendations, or and because we don't have all the answers yet. I agree with you. This could be an easier dropping and placement than opposed to you know, the other barrier, but filling them with water may be a challenge, may take time. And I'm not gonna, I'm at this point in time today, I'm not gonna say one barrier is easier or not easier. The other barrier, Jersey barriers, I do think may be easier to drop once we get over the hurdle of how we do it. Because that's I think a much easier endeavor. So I don't want to say one way or the other today which way to go on that front. Then you get the durability issue. Um, you know, I think these would be good for a couple of years, but they're not going to have the life like the way the other barriers would. And so I just want to, you know, my job here is just to point out the pros and cons on all of these various options here, so you know we can make a good decision when the time comes. I agree with you from a price point perspective; these are absolutely cheaper. Um, and it's, you know, something that you know we should be very cognizant of. So
Director Cummings, if I may too, and you bring up a good point, this is supposed to be informational, which is good. But as we move on to the future, there is somebody here that I would like, that is not here, that I think we should hear in the future before we make a final decision. And that is a question to you, Director Cummings. If this is going to be, who's going to be installing these? And I'm assuming it's going to be DPW. And if it is DPW, I would like to have Director Photo come in and weigh the balance on her procedures and what works best with her type of equipment and everything as well.
absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you. I think that is absolutely something we should look to do. Um, and again, I'm hoping that this is a first conversation, and so we'll you know, have her at another point in time to talk about what she foresees in terms of how we do it, and then the costs associated to it, because you know, I think there's some trade-offs. You know, this one we may be able to do ourselves. The other one we may need to outsource. What is the cost of that? You know, we need to have that type of information, or we need to buy a piece of equipment. We need to have that type of information.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
Mr. Chair, if I may,
absolutely, Alderman Schmidt.
you know, I guess I have more questions that you couldn't answer tonight than I think I've heard. We need to know a little bit more about the safety of these smaller ones. We need to know if all of the areas that we use now will have to have these in the future. We know that the Jersey barriers can be painted, and you certainly could put lights on them. There is no question that you could put a stand next to it with lights. That wouldn't be a problem. So I think what I'd really like to see would be a comparison, a sheet of the good parts and the not so good parts of each section that we're looking at. I love the Jersey barriers for the fact that we'll have them forever. Those things last like 50 years, and they too could be painted. They could be quite decorative. So in the long run, I just need to see more information on the pros and cons of each side. Thank you.
And
Mr. Chairman, we do have more questions pending.
You are the chair.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I'm going to recognize committee member Alderman Jettie, and then in the queue will be Alderman Clay. So Alderman Jettie.
Okay, right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So part of the the experiment downtown, I mean, I think the main reason that we put these barriers downtown was to provide dining area for the restaurants so they could increase their outdoor capacity during COVID. But a side benefit, I think, has been our opportunity to observe the effect of narrowing Main Street, and whether that's been good or bad, and whether that improves Main Street or not. I personally think that that it has improved Main Street. I think it has a traffic calming effect, and I don't see that that traffic has been impeded all that much, but it may just be a consequence of the reduced traffic because of COVID. I don't know, but I like the result. And so I'm thinking that not only are we providing outdoor dining, we're also narrowing Main Street. And so that brings me to the question of, what is the current schedule about removing the current barriers? Do we have to remove them? Is it possible to keep them during the winter? Is it possible to extend the dining season with, I've been to places, ski areas and that type of thing in the wintertime where they have gas heaters that that provide warmth to outdoor diners. Are those so? I don't want to build a mountain of questions here without giving you an opportunity to answer. So the first question is, what is the current schedule, and would it be possible to keep the barriers during the winter?
Excuse me, Director Cummings.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with everything that Alderman Jettie just said. Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the reason why we're here having the conversation. So can we extend the barriers longer than what they've currently placed? The answer to that is, according to our DPW, we would be taking a big risk when snow occurs, when snow removal is necessary. And that in southern New Hampshire really could be any time, late November, early December. The barriers cannot be up. It becomes a very big operational challenge. The DPW had concerns very early on with this whole initiative because of the very issue being raised right now, which is, if it's successful, our people are going to want these barriers out 365, and how could we possibly remove snow if that was the case? So they've been pretty strong in their position that November 15th is the drop dead point. And it's for those reasons. Could they look at, in the future years, changing the city's infrastructure that would have an expense to it, but creating ways to remove the snow that would allow for barriers to be there? Maybe, but that's nothing that we're prepared for this year.
And if I may join into, one of the things Alderman Jettie brought up is like heaters. I would be uncomfortable with that. We do have a division that would be in charge of that, and that would be the Fire Marshal's division. And
If I may,
yes,
Mr.
Director
Chair.
Cummings, please take over. Yes.
So I just want to make sure folks know that actually heaters are allowed on Main Street. They cannot be under tents. They cannot be under any coverings. The fire marshal has said that so long as the propane tanks are kept outside and not in a structure, if someone wanted to bring the heaters indoors at night for security reasons or anything like that, there would be no problems. It's really the propane tank needs to be stored separately. My understanding is a lot of the restaurants on Main Street, and of course what I'm speaking about applies to the entire city, but Main Street particularly, are looking at bringing heaters and storing the portable heaters outdoors to comply with the fire marshal's recommendations. And that is actually starting to happen now. Now, there's two different types of permits that we have here in the city. We have the permitting for right-of-way, which allows for usage of the non-private land. And then we have outdoor dining that's allowed on private land. And depending on where you are, you may have some differing requirements that you need to fulfill. One of them is could the outdoor dining continue beyond the November 15th date on private land. So that wouldn't be necessarily the Main Street restaurants, but restaurants that might be doing outdoor dining on Amherst Street or Daniel Webster or whatever the case may be. The legislation that was approved by the Board of Aldermen only authorized it through November 15th. So if there was a desire to continue it, we would need to get new authorizing type legislation. I'm sorry, it continues through January 1st. January 1st of 2020. So we would have to get some authorization for that. And then there's a whole other different issues that we would have to work through if we were to do that. But it's something that could be done.
Alderman Jettie, you all set?
Yeah, no, if I could follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
So with the snow plowing, I'm assuming that the reason that the Department of Public Works is concerned about the snow plowing is that they need a certain width to get their plows through, and they need a place to push the snow to the sides. Main Street, without the barriers is some I want to say 6 or 7 lanes wide. So would it I don't know, I'm not a public works specialist, but it would seem that that a compromise could be made, where the barriers as they currently are situated could be pushed to allow a wider path for the plows and the snow, and still provide some narrowing to Main Street, and still provide some area for the restaurants to offer dining, outdoor dining, if that, I don't even know if they'd be, if there's any interest in that, but I just think that we don't need Main Street as wide as it was, in order to provide room for the snow plows and the snow.
I agree with you, Alderman Jettie, and I have actually asked that very specific question. Actually, Alderman Clemens, in advance of this meeting, had that very specific thought as well. So in doing my due diligence, I spoke to DPW, and their concern is specifically the snow at some point would get so large it would go over the barriers and onto the other side of the barriers. This was a concern raised. And so how would we be able to control for that and keep it clean? That was a big concern that was raised, because the thought was maybe we could push back the barriers a little bit, create a pocket, if you will, or not have as much outdoor space dedicated to the dining. But the answer when I broached that subject to DPW was that's not something that we could feasibly do. And then they raised the cost issue, so we would then have to pay to have all those barriers moved, and where would we get the money for that? And so those were that was the response I got, and valid concerns. I mean, I totally understand those issues, and so we would have to, we have to work through it.
Okay, and I have another question.
Mr. Chair, can I make a quick point of order?
Yes, you may.
At this point, we're basically looking at redesigning Main Street without the craft people present. And I know Alderman Clee and I had questions about what was actually presented on. Are we moving away from that, or do we get to have those questions?
No, but the courtesy is granted to a committee member. Your point is very well taken. This is part of background information that could probably be provided. Like you say, a lot of these questions could be answered and brought up by Director Photo if Alderman Jettie so wishes to do so, and maybe brought up, and I have no objections in the future, since it was brought up to have Director Photo at a meeting, so with Director Cummings, so we can get into more of the nuts and bolts of this. if that is adequate. But it is true, the intention was just as a presentation, but I am not going to restrict a committee member from what he feels if he wants to ask legitimate questions. So Alderman Lopez, I ask you to extend the same courtesy I am to Alderman
Okay.
Jerry.
Because I felt like you did actually tell me to hold off, but I understand.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Jettie, if you wish to continue.
Yes, the second barrier that you showed us, the silver colored one, the one that's filled with water. Does that, so can it tolerate freezing? If the water freezes, does it will it contain the ice, or will it damage this thing?
Represented that that would not be a problem and that it can expand and contract.
Okay. And one more question. So have you analyzed the advantage of buying these things as opposed to leasing them? Is it more cost effective to own them or to as opposed to leasing them?
So the second option that we talked about, the one that was just up now, there's no option to lease those. Those are just for sale only. Those would be designed and built for Nashua specifically. The other barriers, the concrete barriers, yes, there was an analysis versus leasing versus buying. Ultimately, it's cheaper to buy the concrete Jersey barriers for the long run for obvious reasons. The biggest cost you have is actually the installation. It's the installation of the heavy barriers, having the right equipment, which we don't have, which is really what drives someone to lease as opposed to purchase.
Okay, and one last question: these Jersey barriers are concrete, made by putting them into a form. Is there a wider choice of models that's available, or just this one and the one that's currently there?
Not sure I'm understanding your question. I mean, yes, they are precast. I mean, you can get different lengths. If you're asking, can it be longer than 10 feet? I don't know. Amy may be able to answer that. I don't know if 10 feet is the longest.
No, that's not my question. My question has nothing to do with the length. It's the style, the look, what they look like.
So
You
I
get
guess,
different shapes?
I mean, yes, they're precast. There's all different types of shapes that you can get.
Okay, so the two that we've seen, the ones that were installed at the beginning of the season, and this model where you're showing us tonight, there's more models that are available other than those two.
Yes, there are more models available than those two.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alderman Jettie. Alderman Clay?
Thank you. I think I've only got a couple of questions. Director Cummings, the first question is the precast concrete barriers. I love them. Do they abut each other, or are they spaced apart like the metal water-filled one?
You could do it either way. And in fact, I would probably recommend to extend the coverage, we would space them out. But that would be at the spacing that was recommended by the city engineer, Dan Hudson. He would be the one that actually would determine that. Okay.
Then my next question is, you somewhat answered it when you were talking about the design of the water-filled ones. In there we saw small plantings, and my question was going to be, could we put some of the larger plantings in it, like we see in the large pot that are like on West Pearl or something like that, that could create a barrier for the individual businesses. In other words, they could do their own planting, or as you pointed out, lights or something like that. I'm not necessarily saying lights, but is it practical enough to put some kind of lattice work so that they could kind of separate, or would that not be an acceptable type of thing? I was just thinking keeping the street noises away. That was one of my complaints, was that, especially on Main Street.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a really good observation. The first part is yes, bigger plants can go in, and that could be used as a barrier. The lattice is an interesting concept. I would want to talk to them, talk to the folks about whether lattice could be introduced or not. I, as of speaking to you right now, I can't foresee a reason why it couldn't be, but I don't know. So I'd have to really talk that through with them.
Just to throw out an idea, when I said the lattice, because to be honest with you, I put like lattice barrier up on my deck, and then I put artificial plantings kind of on it, and it gave this really tropical feel to my deck, and because my deck is higher than everybody else's, it also kind of separated their noises and gave me that feeling of, and it was amazing how much sound barrier I had. And I just thought that maybe whether we went with everybody doing it, or we could have the uniqueness of that particular restaurant or something like that to create their own, much like what the Surf did with their plantings.
And so, hopefully in the next few minutes, we can pivot away from the barrier specifically, and we can
Okay.
kind of have a conversation a little bit more about the downtown in terms of the feel and what you desire and what your thoughts are. And that's going to be the question I'm going to pose to you in a few minutes, because I want to get a sense as to whether you're okay with the businesses personalizing the area. As you mentioned, some of the businesses may take ownership and want to do certain things. And I want to make sure that I have a good understanding as to where you all fall on that specific item. Also, but before we get there, I would be remiss also not to point out that it is not an all sum type of solution here. We don't have to go with one and not the other. You could, in theory, do a combination of both. And so, if folks want to do, some of the barriers of, East Pearl Street, the second option that I showed you in certain areas, and want to do the precast New Jersey concrete barrier in other areas, we can absolutely do that. That is definitely something that could be done.
Mr. Chair, if I may just have one last follow-up.
Yes, you may.
My next question was that was actually what my next question was going to be. The mix and match, whether we said this street would have this type and that, would they work within Main Street also? So in other words, if one said, you know what, I'd really like the planters, I'll make sure the water gets put in there once you put them in place, if we got a cooperation from the businesses. And I'm just throwing these ideas out. I'm not married to anything. I just kind of didn't know whether the committee or aesthetically, whether or not you as a director of this would understand whether or not that would be a bad look. So.
I think to some degree, giving some of the businesses some ownership is a good thing. And I think it's definitely something I would encourage. I would draw the line in setting any type of expectation that they're going to maintain it. Because you're going to get some businesses who will maintain it at a very high level and you'll be pleased with it. You'll get other businesses that won't, and it'll become frustrating, and it will potentially sour the issue. So, I think we have to be very careful as to where and how we let things occur. But those barriers that are on the side street could be used out on the main street. The biggest recommendation we got is the two, and it's like this on East Pearl Street as well. You technically have two Jersey barriers on the I guess on the furthest east and the furthest west side that kind of bound the dining area, and then it's what's parallel to the lanes is actually the barriers themselves that I showed you. That's what we would do on Main Street as well. This is a best practice in the industry. Boston does it. All the major cities do it because it's from a public safety perspective. It's what they recommend in terms of handling the traffic calming of those types of barriers.
Thank you. I'm done, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Alderman Clee, if you could lower your hand, it would assist me when I got knocked off the internet there. Lost some of the power to control that, so that we'll make it cleaner. At this particular time, I have Alderman Lopez with Alderman Clemmons in the queue. Alderman Lopez.
So I know we want to pivot away from the barrier discussion, but I just wanted to point out that, point out and then ask a question about the water particularly. It might be a possibility to use, say, fire department's fire hydrant water when they're clearing the hydrants to fill that up. But Director Cummings, do you know if there's going to be any issues with water sitting in those tanks over a period of time? Is it going to go stagnant, or is there any concern of that?
No concern at all. That's what they're designed for. The tank in there is self-contained. And so the city has a couple water trucks. So we would, what we would do is look to use the city's water trucks to fill them.
Okay.
As they got placed. Of course, if we had a receptive business owner that was in a butter that wanted to also fill it, we wouldn't be opposed to that per se. But
with the rose water.
Yeah, but the thought process would be is the city would fill it as once we assembled them.
I wanted to ask if we were going to consult with traffic specifically because of what you said, where it seems like it makes sense to use a combination with the sturdier ones on the end and then the more decorative ones along the inside. And it sounds like that's what you were planning to do.
Everything we do is in coordination with DPW
Okay.
and public safety. I mean, this has to be a very coordinated effort. So, so yes, to answer your question.
And then, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, because he's here, I wanted to ask Manny Ramirez. He's the president of Positive Street Art. We were talking earlier about metal versus concrete. I know you can spray paint on concrete. I'm pretty sure you can do it with metal, but I wanted to see if there's any complications that might come out of that or anything in terms of material.
As far as the concrete one, those would be pretty easy to paint on and to clear coat for it to be durable. The sheetrock ones, not sheetrock, the metal ones would be pretty difficult. I mean, as far as longevity speaking, because the paint doesn't adhere very well to that. So you could realistically paint something on them, but it wouldn't last very long before it starts to fall apart and chip off.
Okay, because I know that they do paint fire hydrants, but I wasn't sure if that's the same as sheet metal or whatever. And I know I've used that, and it's some kind of thicker glue kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like an enamel paint, and that you could use that. However, it'll be difficult to design stuff. I mean, you could do some pretty like basic design with that paint, but it's very difficult and messy to work with. So, I mean, yeah, it's possible, definitely. But again, metal, it's kind of a tricky material to work with as far as painting it. That type of metal specifically, because it kind of has a polished finish, so it makes it less porous than other materials.
Okay, so I just thought that was worth considering, because with what Director Cummings was saying, it seems like you can customize these to make some reasonably like nice little neighborhood areas, especially being able to put the lights on them. And I know Great American Downtown and Downtown Improvement Committee have their own work, in getting Christmas lights and that kind of stuff. So I just wanted everybody to kind of see how that could all play together.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yep.
Very good, thank you. Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, I think my question was answered, but I guess I would want Director Cummings, or ask Director Cummings if you could explore it more. Because I'm sure that one of the objections to the barriers with the water would be the time that it would take to fill the water. And so what would be interesting to explore, and this might be a union issue, which is why I bring it up, would be to see if that's something that volunteers could do or a business could do, where the city could, if it's a water truck or if we're hooking it up to, because you wouldn't want to charge a business their own water, to hook that up. You'd want it to be the city somehow. But if we could somehow provide the water, but then have the businesses fill those up, or if we had a volunteer group that wanted to do that, that might be a way to alleviate some of the labor. So I don't know if that's been discussed or anything like that.
It's a great question that you've raised, and I'll bring it back and look into it more. I don't have an answer for you right now, but that's a great
Okay,
idea.
yeah, because obviously you're talking, the issues that I would foresee would be the number one is always the labor issue. Number two would be liability on the city. But if we could get around both of those, that might be a really great way to utilize those more, I guess. So thank you.
Director Cummings, if I may, on the water ones, how many gallons are we talking about? Do you know?
I defer to Amy because I'm sure she would have a better idea than I do. I'm gonna let me just take a guess and see how off I am. 400-gallon tank. No.
There are 55 to 60 gallon tanks, which makes the barrier with the metal roughly just over 600 pounds.
I knew it was something like, all right, so 600 pounds. Okay.
Yeah.
And from my fire department studies, in case you're wondering, 1 gallon of water, 8.33 pounds per gallon. So there you go. Any other committee members or have any further questions? Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I do have
Yeah.
one quick question.
Oh, absolutely. Alderman Clayton.
Um, Thank you. Mr. Cummings, I assume that you have discussed this with some of the downtown businesses or the Downtown Improvement Committee or something like that as to what their feelings would be, or are you bringing it here first?
I've had informal conversations with a lot of downtown businesses, either when I'm out talking to them or at the Downtown Improvement Committee. I've had some good feedback, and not particularly on the barriers per se, whether they like one or the other. That's still, that's still to be determined. It's been on how the outdoor dining is going, and what they like, what they don't like, and what has worked, what hasn't worked. And the universal consensus, and I'm not going to say that everyone is happy with it, because I'm sure that there's some out there who are not, but the vast majority of folks I hear from are very happy with how the outdoor dining has occurred. And there's some tweaks that we did early on that I think some folks really appreciated. And so it's worked out very well. And actually the sentiment that's being expressed now more than anything is there's such an energy, there's such a good feeling with the downtown. They like it so much. There's a fear of that energy dissipating and going away come November 15th. And the words I've heard is we're going to be barren. It's going to be stoic. We have, things feel so good out here. It's great to see the activity and the life, and to see that just overnight disappear. There's concerns. There's concerns about that. And so what can we do to try to keep the energy that has been created this summer is kind of the conversation that's occurring now. Are there different things that might happen, live performances on street corners, lighting, various things like that, just to try to keep the activity of people being outside and showing people that, you know, we do have an active and very lively downtown, which prior to the barriers going out, you know, that messaging really wasn't there. And now that we have it, all the merchants want to keep it. And that's what I hear universally.
Mr. Chair, may I have a little bit more time? At least one more
Absolutely.
question.
Alderman,
I'd like to follow up with what Director Cummings said. I have been part of some of those meetings where they've been talking about putting up the lighting and so on before barriers come down, so we don't have that stark look. So that's kind of why I brought up whether or not the downtown businesses were being part of this decision process. And I would like to see at least their input with whatever is decided. And I don't just mean the barriers. I mean how the aesthetic will look, you know, whether uniqueness of each space and so on. I would be very curious as to what their input was, because they have to live with it and this becomes their business, and they also have to live with the downtown. So I would be really interested in seeing that. And I think Alderwoman Schmidt had kind of alluded to something like that when she was talking about all the questions that we need answered. So I really would like to see their input before this committee or any other committee makes final decision. Thank you.
okay, if I may, any other questions for any of the other committee members or aldermen present?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Alderman
Well-
Jettie.
So you mentioned Factory Street at the beginning, and if since we're not talking about, since we've moved off the barriers, I'd like to hear what your thinking is about Factory Street. There really aren't any restaurants there. I know you've put up, or somebody's put up some barriers already. What is the thinking? What is your plan, and what is the thinking behind it?
I knew as soon as I said Factory Street, I was going to get that question from you, Alderman Jettie. So the rationale being is there is a thought process right now of adding on-street parking to Factory Street in certain areas that doesn't have it, which this would create more additional on-street parking in that neighborhood. It's one of the ideas that we came up with to help alleviate the loss of parking, you know, on the School Street parking lot. So that what we would be doing is looking to narrow Factory Street to, and we would be doing it with just barriers right now, just to see how the traffic flow goes for the next month. That's the rationale behind it, and to make sure that we wouldn't be creating any major problems. We don't think we would be. Engineering, economic development, community development, we've all got together, we kind of looked at it, we thought that this was a plausible solution. So when we had these extra barriers that we technically have until November 15th, and we don't want to waste the opportunity, we said, well, why don't we redeploy them along Factory Street, make sure that the flow of traffic can be handled in the 2 lanes that we think it will create. We'll lose the 3rd lane right now, and ultimately, when the time comes, you know, we'll know with confidence that we can put on-street parking without creating any issues.
Okay. So will the barriers provide enclosed parking, or will the barriers shut off not only travel but parking as well?
Well, there is no parking. Where we'll put them up, there is technically no parking. And so this is, just use the word technically because I am sure some people park there because the road is so wide, but technically it's not allowed. It's not allowed. And so what we would be doing is making sure we could put the on-street parking there. So you wouldn't be able to get into the area if that's what you're asking.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, there are 3 lanes, and from the Water Street intersection to the entrance, the entrance to the Bank of America parking lot, there is on-street parking on the south side. So will that, what lane are you going to block off? Is it the north lane that,
That's my understanding. I'll double check that with engineering, but I believe it's the north lane that we would be looking to block off from Main Street to, I don't know how far back we're gonna go, but you know, before water for sure.
so if you block off the north lane and there's parking on the south lane, that leaves one lane of traffic, and
There'd still be 2 lanes of traffic.
okay.
All set, Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Lopez.
So I noticed that too, and you kind of threw me off, Director Cummings, because I thought the restaurant next to Alderman Jettie's practice was finally opening, because it looks like they were finally at their point of completion inside.
They're getting close. I can give you an update. I spoke to them last week, and they're looking to open next spring.
Sweet. I mean, they have outdoor dining right on their deck, so that's going to be amazing. I got constituent feedback thanking me for narrowing that street to make it easier to cross from one of the Delanus residents, and I was like, I feel like I practically did nothing to make that happen. So it is a great move, and it does make it a much narrower street. The only thing I would ask is that if we do look at any kind of changes there, take a look at the curb cuts, particularly because some of them are very steep. And if anybody is on a scooter or whatever and tries to cross at the wrong point, they're not gonna be able to do it. They're gonna get off of one side and it's not completed on the other. So just, I can't specifically name where. I want to say it's over by the garage, but I was driving my little 9-bot, which finds every single flaw in the sidewalk. And when I tried to get back up on the sidewalk on the other side, across from one curb cut, there was one missing. So just something to keep an eye on. And if we do any redesigns over there, and I know that's been proposed way back from even when James Veo had the one-way street reversal and we did the traffic study. So I'm encouraged to hear that we are looking at traffic calming that area. I know that there was a employee of the pharmacy who was hit by a car a couple of years ago over there because it's such a long cross to make. So I think narrowing it down to one lane, as long as the traffic isn't like shooting through there, is a very good move. I would just make sure that the curb cuts are safe, because people coming through on a scooter might suddenly become stranded in the middle of the street.
So I just pulled up my screen here, Alderman Lopez, because I wanted to clarify what I believe happens on this street, and I'll double check what I'm about to say is, and can everyone see my arrow, my cursor? So I believe the parking that's allowed is somewhere in this vicinity along here. And then what I believe occurs is this along here is a turning lane here, and then there's 2 additional lanes down here. And I believe you can go straight and then you turn and it's a double turn. I could be wrong about that. And so the thought process was maybe we just from like here, you know, obviously we would have to have this opening right here, but then, you know, close off here. And I don't know where it would be, maybe like somewhere around here, you know, or even back a little bit further to like here. The idea would be is to kind of narrow this whole area. So you'd have 2 lanes through here. Now, granted, you don't technically have 2 lanes up through here, as I believe that's technically parking back here, but then that parking goes away. There's no parking, I think, beyond like right here. I could be wrong about that, but it's somewhere in through here where I don't believe you're allowed to park anymore. And so it opens back up again.
If I could just point out something based on what you just said, you were pointing out Mechanic Street as that little street. It might be worth talking to the abutters and looking at discontinuing that, because it's really used mostly as a service entrance for those restaurants. Every now and then in a blue moon, you get a car that actually knows that that's there and might try to cut across from that parking lot into Mechanic Street. And it literally just confuses everybody who thought it was an alleyway. So it
That's
might.
my favorite street, Alderman.
Okay, it's sorry about Alderman Clemens cut through, but maybe if you had like the right tags, you could drive through. But it might be worth considering whether or not that really needs to keep being a street.
I think that street, and actually my favorite is this one right here, Eldridge. So along the same lines, it's like the same thing. So your point is well taken. And we'll look at it. I
My
mean,
2 favorite streets, guys, come on.
yeah, I know. I'll do.
You can make it an entrance to that parking lot and call it parking lot, you know, on the side or whatever. But right now it's an actual street where you don't have to slow down or anything. And you see like a lot of people start driving through there because their GPS tells them what to do. And they get really confused when they're suddenly surrounded by dumpsters and no clearance on either side. So it's just something to look at, I think.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's just, I want to make sure. I'm not sure what the businesses are right here that use it and how it may affect them. So we just want to.
Well, definitely SFK and Nashua Garden. I've seen people loading and unloading stuff in there. Even though it's a street, but whatever.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, yep, sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, to those that do not know, Mechanic Street is a one-way going, entrance from the south to head north. So if anybody's leaving that parking lot and driving up Mechanic Street, exiting onto Factory Street, they're in violation of a one-way street ordinance that is currently law. So just to bring that point up.
Don't go out to the parking lot. But I see a lot of people use that. They go from the parking lot across the street, cut diagonally across the road, and then cut down Mechanic Street so they can miss a bunch of blocks.
Well, it is a street.
No questions.
Yes, you had something, Director Cummings?
Yes, if I could, I wanted to kind of just pivot away a little bit from the barrier conversation specifically and just get a general sentiment from this group as to what they've liked about the narrowing of Main Street, and in particular, what, where their priority streets may be or areas may be. At some point, I'm going to come back before you with the proposal, and I'd like to get an idea as to, and with that being said, we're going to have to prioritize. And so I just want to get a sense as to, where we should be looking to preserve, and if we were to pull back a little bit, where would you like to see that happen? Technically, our narrowing goes, essentially from City Hall all the way over on the other side of the bridge here, to about here. We narrow all in through here, which, we dropped some barriers in through there. We've had the barriers on the bridge. Oops, sorry. We've had some barriers put out on East Pearl Street. We really haven't had any barriers put out on West Pearl Street. We haven't done anything on any of the side streets really. So wanted to kind of get a sense from you all as to where you'd like to see the barriers in terms of priorities.
Well, that, Director Cummings, you kind of led into what a question that I have. We are getting these two different types of barriers on a trial basis, so that we can look at them and find out which ones that pick and choose which ones we want to go to in the future. That being said, everything has a terminus of November 18th. That being said, to get further information, what do you suggest that we should meet again to discuss this? Because I would like to have other stakeholders that probably could answer some of those questions, such as Director Photo and everybody else come in a way to balance on the different issues,
Sure. So I guess I would suggest over the next month or so, I'm planning on having another community type forum virtually that I had previously back last spring when we did this. Maybe wait till after that so I can provide you with some data. And then the Downtown Improvement Committee also wants to do some canvassing and talk about it with some of the merchants in Main Street. So I would say over the next 3 weeks or so, that will all occur. And then I could probably have a more substantive conversation with you about what we're hearing as terms of priorities and areas of interest, and maybe areas that are not of interest.
Okay, because I imagine the concrete barriers can be extruded relatively quickly. What is the lead time on the other barriers as far as you say they're practically handmade? Um, how long does it take to order them? Or for them to construct them?
Yeah, that's a great question. They will need a longer lead time than the concrete barriers. I don't know exactly how long of a lead time they would need, but they would need months, as opposed to the concrete barriers where we could probably get those turned around in 6 weeks without a problem. We would need a few months with the other barriers.
Keeping that in mind, so it was after our next meeting that you'll come in and give your presentation, probably start heading in that direction of making,
I would,
they'll give us how many weeks of looking at the two products to evaluate?
exactly. That's right, Mr. Chairman. So I would figure, over the next month or so, we kind of look, evaluate. I'd really like to kind of have a decision made in the end of November, early December period. So before the first of the year, because March 15th comes quickly. We can have it ordered and in place, and we have a plan. So, I that's why I was saying tonight, there's no need to, make any decisions this evening. I want everyone to understand all the various trade-offs of the products. And I'm hopeful over the next, month to month and a half, we'll come to a conclusion by mid-November. Thanksgiving type time frame would be perfect. And then that would give us more than enough time.
Okay. That being said, for the committee members, there is a future presentation from Director Marchant that she would like to present to us at our next monthly meeting. And if you feel, Director Cummings, you have something else on this particular matter or anything, give me a shout and we'll get you right on the docket with that.
Great, thank you.
But to your question, do we have any other questions from committee members to Director Cummings? I see the
A point
hand.
of clarification.
Alderman Lopez.
Alderman O'Brien had said the 18th of November. But you said the 15th for the sunset date, the outside dining.
November 15th. November 15th.
Okay, and then the citywide one is like in January, so we don't have to worry about updating that one.
The private property one
Okay.
is January 1st, and that's and so yeah. So if you want to extend that, that's going to take a legislative act.
Okay, and what was what was March 15th? Other than my birthday.
That's when outdoor dining is allowed again.
Okay.
Our season is March 15th to November 15th. So
Okay. I wasn't sure I missed that reference. It's my birthday though, so I was paying attention. Not counting 2020, so I'm going to celebrate it twice.
Future happy birthday, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Clements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The relative to the barriers on Main Street, if I remember, we had to pass legislation for that as well. Is that correct? And then that ends on November 15th. So in order to get, so we will need a plan and we will need legislation in order for us to get that in place for March 15th, presumably till November 15th the following year, right?
absolutely correct.
Okay.
Alderman Clements.
Okay.
And if I could actually, there's one other issue we should really kind of put on the table, which I can't believe I'm about to do, and actually maybe stop me. But and I'm going to put it, and I guess what I'm going to say is I'm going to put it on the table for you to think about, but I'm really not looking for any feedback right now. But right now we have created a parking environment where you have 15-minute free parking from noon to like 8 p.m. or something like that. I'm going to need direction as to whether we want it to still be free or whether you're going to want to charge for that 15 minutes or not. So You know, I hate even bringing it up, but it is something that we should at least be aware of and start to contemplate, because it's something we're going to need to address.
And
Well, we have to blend
specifically,
it
you're
into the Christmas
mentioning,
thing.
the takeout spots is what we're,
Correct. The takeout spots, the drop zone areas, if you will. And I don't want to say takeout spots because that's it, you know, retailers can use it as well. So, but it's the 15-minute parking. Technically, right now, it's free from noon to 8 p.m., I believe. And that's set to expire as well. So I just raise it as a point that we're going to need to think about moving forward.
communicate on that. And just while we're on this particular subject, can you explain the procedure that parking enforcement would use on that 15 minutes? If they walk, they see a car there, do they tag it or just make note or photograph it and come back on the next route? And if the vehicle's still there over the 15 minutes, then they could receive a citation or a ticket, I should say, you know.
That's correct. If we were to enforce that 15 minutes, what we would do, and legally now we can't technically chalk anymore. The Supreme Court has ruled that that's an invasion of privacy. But what we do is take pictures, and that picture is time, date stamped. And so when if we notice that that vehicle was there longer than 15 minutes, when a parking enforcement specialist is doing their rounds, they would then, you know, I think for a while they would issue warnings, but at some point they would probably just start writing a violation in a ticket. That's how it would be addressed. And just so folks know, that's how we're handling abuse on Main Street in the non-drop zone areas. We are writing tickets. You still do have to pay for parking, you know, on Main Street. And so, and actually we've heard from the merchants in the restaurants a lot more now how important that is, that we actually have a presence out there, so there aren't cars out there abusing the limited amount of spaces. So, so that's just something that the group should be aware of.
Well, thank you, Director Cummings. I think that assists the committee members a little bit more clarity in making the decision.
I see Alderman Clemmons has had his hand up. For a
Oh,
few minutes.
absolutely. I've got to recognize him as we speak. Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. I just had one other, because you asked specifically about my or our thoughts on the on how it's going. I think it's been a huge success. It's definitely something that we should do next year. I have been in personally, and I have heard from other people that at certain times of the day, the traffic does get really bad. It's been backing up. So I was dropping my wife off the other day. She goes to the yoga studio downtown, and I was dropping her off, and I live on Ash Street, so we came up Main and straight down. And when we got to about, I want to say where CVS is, just before CVS, the traffic was all the way backed up. And it went through several light cycles before we even got to the other side of the street.
What time of day? What time of day was that?
That was between 5 and 5:30. So, you know, I think that there are times when, especially now that, you know, more people are working, you know, kids are, even though they're not in Nashua, the kids are in schools around the town. So I think it is backing up. I think we need to look at that a little bit, because I have heard from people that, and I've experienced it myself, that it's bad. I don't know if that's something that can be handled with timing, traffic light timing.
That's what I was just about to say to you. Yep.
And so, and again, I know that like when the Opticon goes off, sometimes that will mess up the computer system and stuff like that. So, but anyhow, I overall though, if you had to ask me, I would rather deal with the traffic. because I think that it's important for our business community to thrive. And they definitely have done so. I know for a fact that we've saved businesses down there that would have otherwise closed. So to me, you know, I guess the way that I would handle this is to ask the businesses, which businesses who have the barriers in front of them now, is that something you want to do next year? Get that list. But I would also ask, the businesses on like East Pearl and we're doing East Pearl, but West Pearl, Elm Street, you know, see if that is something that we could offer some of those businesses and some of the other places around the downtown, because I know that there are some businesses that didn't really utilize it all that much. Like, for example, I don't want to speak for them, but you know, Espressos, if I walk by there, they don't really utilize that space, right? So is that something where we could move those barriers to a side street like West Pearl, for example, if one of those restaurants wanted it, and you know, and then put the parking back on Main Street. So I guess it's really, before we didn't have the luxury of being able to specifically ask, hey, is this something you want to do? We kind of designed it so that, because we wanted to get it done with, right? We wanted to get it out there. I think we have a little bit more time to plan, a little bit more time to really go out and do a survey and actually ask and design a map that is truly tailored to each business. And so I would encourage you to do that. But I would go beyond just Main Street. It would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
I was just going to observe that the traffic timing might be part of the issue, but there's also a lot of construction going on at that intersection particularly. And there may also be some opportunity for the police to do a little bit more careful policing. I cross that intersection a lot, and I see a lot of cars like try to beat the light and they don't, and they end up stuck in the middle of the intersection. And then there's this tail of people trying to squeeze in that don't always make it. So they get in the way of people trying to make their right-hand turns, or, you know, traffic slows down waiting for someone to pass when the light changes. So that intersection is very problematic in general, but it's also suffering at the moment from all of the sidewalk improvements on East Hollis Street, and then all the utility work that has to go along with that too.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. And to the public, you must remember, it is against state law to block an intersection. Any other comments from or questions from members of the committee? Seeing none. Director Cummings, if you could stand by. Alderman Lopez, thank you for stepping up to the plate when I get kicked off of the internet. Kind of love the service. It seems to happen to our president there the other night at an automatic meeting. But Alderman Lopez, did you look to have public comment?
Sorry, rookie mistake. I thought the public comment was at the end of the meeting and I didn't have the script, so I actually skipped it at the beginning. So we should have it at the end, I think.
Well, we could, yeah, get into it. I do have it on the script in the beginning, but
I didn't have it when I was trying to cover.
No, thank you. You did a fine job, and I thank you for stepping in the emergency. Thank you so much. Okay, so seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank Director Cummings for coming in tonight. We had this discussion, and I says, we really have nothing on our plate. He says, this is the perfect opportunity to make this type of presentation. And I think I did myself, and I'm sure other members of the committee, Director Cummings found it very informative. And it sounds like we got a yeoman's work to do with it to come up with the different legislations that is needed. So I will be following you up as the chair on this particular, so please, we'll have a back and forth so we can schedule and try to get some of these things going. And if there's cooperation with many members on the committee, we may seek to initiate having legislation filed to work towards the common goal. And so feel free to contact me on that, and we'll see if we can get those particular items, the ducks in a row, so to speak, so we can get this thing moving forward. And just again, when are these barriers coming in for our perusal?
Amy will be able to tell you the exact dates, but they're being dropped now.
Yeah, 4 of them got delivered today, and the other 16 show up next Wednesday.
Okay. And I'm sure if the public wants to contact me or any other members or your favorite alderman on the committee on what is your favorite, we're not going to hold a contest, but if you feel that you want to express a desire on one more than the other, we will listen. So thank you very much. So again, Director Cummings, thank you for
Thank you.
coming in. Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Anything else from other members of the board? Okay, then moving along to my clerk, communications,
There are none.
unfinished business,
Again, none.
new business resolutions,
None.
new business ordinances.
None.
We do have 2 bills tabled in committee. Without objection, I will skip over them at this particular time. General discussion. I will open up general discussion from members of the aldermen.
Thank you. I'd like to, if I may, apologize that at the beginning when we lost our leader, I did the roll call and the only person that remembered to tell us that he was alone in the room was Alderman Jettie. So let me also say that I am alone in the room. Alderman Lopez,
I've been alone this entire time.
there you go. And Alderman O'Brien, you are here and alone?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And I
I
also
keep
want to
myself
mention,
company.
I also want to mention also in attendance, we have Alderman Clee, Alderman Clemens, we have Amy DeRocher, and we have Mr. Ramirez. And I do apologize. Thank you very much.
No need to apologize. The clerk work is never done. Thank you. Very diligent. Anybody else for general discussion? Okay, at this particular time, we'll revisit public comment. Is there a member of the public that would like to speak on what was discussed tonight? Seeing none, moving on to remarks by aldermen. Everybody's good. I love when the group is content. There is no need for a possible non-public session. Alderman Schmidt, do you have a motion?
I do. I move to adjourn by roll call.
Thank you. The motion is to adjourn by roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien,
Yes.
Alderman Lopez,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt says yes, and Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
4 yeas, sir.
Thank you. Before I close the meeting, I know we had a lot of questions. I appreciate everybody's patience. We did allow everybody their opportunity to clear up on the matters and to speak, and I thank everybody for that. So I'm going to declare that the meeting closed at 20:33 and wish everybody a good night. Thank you.